We love shooting, hunting, and educating. So if you want to learn about long-range shooting, you're in the right place. This is the Long Range Addicts Podcast. Shooter ready, stand by.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I took a week off last week because we're setting up for Dog Valley Precision, so I'm kind of overwhelmed, overloaded. Plus, I got sick of listening to myself for a week, so I wanted to take a week off, and it's been a good reprieve. Messaged these guys this morning and kind of talked. I'm like, what do we even want to talk about? What do we want to do? Do we want to just interview somebody today? But these guys came up with a pretty good topic. We've been having this a lot on the tactics page, Team POI tactics page, about people when they go into a stage, what they want to do, different things, whether it be like gear or different things like that. So we kind of wanted to go over it. Maybe it'll help somebody else. Shit, hell, maybe I'll even learn something. You never know, which doesn't take much because I don't know a whole lot anyway. I just pretend really well. But I've got these guys on. I appreciate them coming. First off, I want to thank Benchmark Barrels. Huge thank you as always. Got my Benchmark barrel today, actually. I got the new, it's a 6mm for my 6GT. It's a 7.5 twist JVCR or whatever the heck that is. So it's like a freaking baby seal club, be able to hit people with it and shoot at the same time. So I'm excited. Jose made me do a GT, told me if he didn't, I'm just
still better than a 308.
Hey, don't get me started on the 308. I'll bring that freaking thing. It's probably got all sorts of dust on it, but I'll pull it out. We can go into that later too about making fun of me with a freaking 308.
We just need to force Jose to shoot some Palma.
No.
He'll do it. He pretends he won't. He'll still do it.
I'll shoot anything. It doesn't matter.
Thanks for joining us, guys. Jose's here, Jonathan's here, JD's here. I'm kind of excited about this because I always like to talk about, different gear and different things, which maybe helps other people out. Might help me out. I'm a gear whore. I got tons of tripods, bags, all sorts of stuff. But I'm always out there trying to find something new, even though I need to practice more. Would probably help me out a ton. But I kind of wanted to start with, because I've got my match coming up, Dog Valley Precision. It'll be the first weekend in June. By the way, if anybody wants to sign up, I just opened 5 more slots, so you need a wait list if you want to come on to it. Got 19 squads going. It ought to be fun. But I kind of wanted to start off asking these guys, because I know which one mine was. What was your worst stage ever? Do you guys remember what you're walking up your first stage? What was your worst stage ever walking into it? Go ahead. Go, Jose.
Oh, man. This probably won't even be the right answer, but no, I do know. Last day or day one of Rocky Mountain Mayhem 2 years ago, last stage of the day was 1,400 yards. Day two, first stage of the day was holdover. And I had zeroed my elevation turret, but I had not zeroed my windage turret, and the RO had not caught it either, even though they were told to check everybody, which is not his fault, it's mine. And I was shooting an MOA scope that I was testing at the time, and I had 14 MOA of wind in for 500-yard targets with no wind. Like, there was no wind blowing the next morning. And so I was having to hold windage and elevation, and I was holding 14 MOA left out into the nowhere. That was probably one of the more embarrassing. And that's not even that embarrassing. People watching were just like, oh, okay, whatever. I think I got like 3 hits. But for me, I was just like, how idiotic could you be to hold 14 MOA left for an entire stage because you just didn't remember?
I'm surprised you dial for wind. A lot of people don't. I try not to because I knew that
it was one target at 1,400 yards, and it was probably every bit of a 15-mile-an-hour wind, so it was worth it to just dial and hold center. It was one target. You took 5 shots. You ran upstairs, and you took 5 more shots. So dialing made sense. I rarely dial, but naturally, that's the one time that it screwed me. So it happens.
Yep. I know how that feels. I do it all the time. Still stupid enough to do it all the time. What about you, Slinsky?
So I can't think of a worse stage. I definitely had a worst match. Would have been one of the Lapua Rimfire series up at Peacemaker in West Virginia last year. I had some work done on my trigger on one of my guns and decided to not go practice with it before I shot the match. And I was dry firing it inside the one of the bays for the rifle team. And Fergie actually dry fired it, and he was running into an issue like every 10 shots where it wouldn't cock the firing pin. And I kind of just blew it off, was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. Like, it'll be fine. Send it. Yeah, it was not fine. I did not send it half the time. I think I got 32nd at that match because I would have to end up like halfway through the match, just completely stopped. I'd have to rack the bolt like 5 times to get a round off. And so we were shooting a stage off a spool, and I think I attempted to fire about 30 times for 9 shots. And it was absolutely miserable. We were just filling out the squatting roster for each stage. I just started putting myself first every time, and I didn't even put my name. I just put Wind Pig because I would only get like 2 or 3 shots off anyway. Like, the match is gone. Like, I didn't care.
Oh, you used a better word than I would have. Usually we say the B word, but wind pig word. That's usually what I am, no matter what. Even if I have a good trigger, I'm still the wind pig. What about you, JD?
Oh, we were running a match last year. I was running my gas gun, 20-inch 308 and PRS, just because, hey, it's what I work with. So I want to get more experience on that. And great gas gun, had no issues with it, running it suppressed and everything like that. But 2 things happened in one match. It kind of happened to a couple of us, kind of in little stages. So something had happened with our scopes, which we didn't realize. We were just sending rounds. And they're always high or low, depending on who the guy was. And for me, it was always low. Couldn't figure it out. Went in my Kestrel, tried to figure out where my true was wrong, where my muzzle velocity was off, breaking down environmentals, everything like that, just tearing apart my Kestrel. Needless to say, I go back and I glance at my turrets and I'm half a mil up. So that was half the problem right there. But didn't really pay attention to lube on my gas gun and ended up having to manually cycle every round because it wouldn't feed from the mag reliably, as dry as it was. So that was just quite a lesson learned on that stage. So it was a good time.
Yeah, that's why I don't run a gas gun. They freaking hate me when I try and run them especially during a match. But I build a 223 Wild gas gun that I've shot at a couple matches, and I always seem to run into a freaking issue when I run a gas gun. And I think they just hate me, but I don't know. But I can see if you're going to use it for work and you're going to train with it, that's pretty damn good. That's a great way to do it. I mean, run it, and you might learn something later that you can use in real world situations. So that's actually pretty good. But yeah, I did that. I remember, I don't know, I've had all sorts of bad days. And the thing is watching some of these people comment, in groups and forums, it's the freaking little things that always freaking screw you. Whether you dialed on the last stage and forgot to put it back to 0, or, you wrote the stuff down wrong, or you forgot to update your environmentals in your Kestrel, or there's like 10 million things that can go wrong in any given time. And it's amazing how, number one, it gets in your head, because then you start freaking choking, later on down, you're like, oh, frick, everything's falling apart. The wheels are coming off. The train's going off the tracks. Shit's going bad. But, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this and, maybe come up with some things that we could help the listeners out with that we've had issues with, that maybe we can help them to where they don't have it. So I noticed, was it Jose, did you ask what, I can't remember, maybe it was you or Strachan or somebody asked about little things going into a stage. Who was that? Was that Will?
It wasn't me. I was commenting on that thread.
Yeah,
I just don't even remember who posted it now.
We had, what was that? 2 weeks ago, so something like that.
No. Yeah, and we talked about it, and it's just a little tips of going into a stage, understanding what you need to do before, and I think we can break that down a little bit more from when you're going to go through the stage. Now, a lot of the times you want to look through your spotting scope to watch the wind of the guy in front of you, right? To try and make sure you can figure out is it left or right? Is it switching? You know, what's going on with your wind? But in your guys' opinion, where is the best time to go back, double check everything, and then what is your checklist going through, you know, your stage? What do you guys do?
Well, right off the bat, I think I've seen guys assume the stage brief halfway through when the guy's briefing it. And we saw this on a stage down or up at Frontline in North Carolina, right by the border of Virginia. One of the stage briefings said, once time starts, you can't touch your scope at all. And there was more than one person who time started and then flipped up their scope caps. Just little things like that. So, I mean, you're starting with something as simple as paying attention to the stage brief. You know, that's, you know, it seems like a given, but surprisingly, it's not. A lot of guys, or some guys, get like 80% through it, and the rest is just assumed knowledge, and not so much.
Yeah. What about you guys?
One thing that I've kind of picked up lately, and I don't know if this works for everybody, but I'm one of the crazies who until yesterday didn't own a Kestrel. So I use my phone for my dope. And I find that if I wait to write down like my yardage and my dope, like, you know, 2 or 3 shooters before I'm going to shoot, then a lot of times I'll pull it up and there's a text message or a phone call or whatever, and I get distracted. And even little things like that will mentally take you out of it. So lately I've tried to, like, the moment I approach a stage, unless the literal RO is talking, like, I go ahead and write my dope, do my phone, whatever, put my dope on my scope, dial the first target, and then I like put my phone down. And then it's like, you know, reading the directions, watching people, you know, wind, whatever. But even something like that, little things that you don't like realize mentally, like distract you, like take you out of the game. That's something, just a little something that I've kind of changed over the last year or so. I actually try to do my dope like as soon as I approach a stage, and then now I've got time to pay attention to the wind, make a plan, whatever, without that electronic distraction, frankly, you know. So.
Yeah. So for me, I started doing my stage prep earlier and earlier, and kind of like Jose was saying, like, I do mine almost exactly after the stage brief. Like, I've noticed I've kind of become a little bit of an asshole about it, and I'm a bit antisocial right after the stage brief. And I go, even if I'm the last shooter and I've got 20 minutes until it's my turn to shoot, I go set everything up, and then I'll start to have the side conversations and spot and do some of the other stuff. And then usually about 2 shooters before me, I go back and double check everything, because I used to do it a couple shooters before myself. And then I always had like a stage where I forgot to write down the dope on my dope card, or I wrote it down incorrectly and I was a mil off, or I was going to dial some and hold some, and I forgot to dial the initial thing. So I'm holding half of what I should be and stuff like that. So I think I've become a little bit antisocial with my stage prep initially, just to make sure that I do it all right, and then kind of go back and double check it right before I shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's a good idea. And I think the biggest thing that I think everybody needs to take away from this is everybody's going to do it differently. Everybody's comfortable differently. And it's like getting that habit in your head and constantly doing it. You know, sometimes I'll completely be talking to somebody or trying to do something else, and it's like getting in that habit. You know, as soon as I'm done shooting, I'll walk over and hurry and load my mag, you know, and make sure I'm counted, put it in my holster. So I know both my holsters for my mags they're good. I don't have to worry about that. You know, it's like taking off a checklist on what you're going to break down as you're going through it. It's just one less thing off the checklist once you get to the next stage, so that you can then focus on the stage brief, how you're going to shoot it, you know, wind, different things like that. And, you know, then also as soon as you're done with the stage, before you even get up off your knees or before you pull off the prop, go back to 0. You know, trying to get those little things through your head to try and make those things happen. Because again, I every time I see it, every time it happens to me, it's the little things that just completely kick my ass. And it's like, what should I have done, or what could I have done? And I know a lot of people are visual. So do you guys think maybe putting up a little, like, you know, going on Amazon, getting a little board and putting it up there with maybe a checklist or something, or maybe even writing a checklist in your booklet? What would you guys recommend to other shooters that might work for you?
Especially starting out, I think checklists are like hands down the best way to do it. I used to make all my guys on the rifle team write out their checklist. And beginning of the season, I would make it really strict, and they would actually have to go through and do it, and I would ask them to see it. And then later on in the season, I didn't really care as much because they learned it and they memorized it, and they didn't need it right in front of them. But especially starting out, a checklist is huge. I mean, when I was on a team in Hawaii, we used to have our new guys write it on the inside of their scope cap, so that every time they got down, they flip up their rear scope cap, and then they've got their checklist written in there on what they need to do for not even just a course of fire, but even like every shot. Like, I need to make sure my position's good, I'm relaxed, go through their whole process just so they have that consistency piece.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And maybe, to even so I know we talked about it the other day within the group about having, whether it's a rail mounted, pick mounted, like your data card or something. But I know a lot of people run armbands, and it might be a good idea to run an armband and just kind of lift it up and go through a checklist. Or nowadays, everyone's carrying a freaking tripod with them, just have a notebook and a tripod and rock and roll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did something way.
We kind of touched
ahead.
on it a little bit. We focus more on, I guess, memorizing it, to kind of get away from what Jonathan did when he was a team coach and everything like that. But when you're starting out too, watch what other guys do. Watch the guys who've done this a while and ask them why they're doing different things and little things like that. And that might be something where, you don't take everything from everyone, but if it's one thing from, a person here, one thing from a person there, to develop kind of how you want to approach a stage, look at that too. So you're building from multiple layers of experience rather than kind of just where you're sitting at too.
Yeah, that's really good. Like there's a pretty experienced shooter here locally who, like, he made a point, kind of like going back to my, like, don't let your electronics distract you. When he first picked up a Kestrel, he would just sit there and fiddle with it and just sit there and like be like, okay, I gotta get my atmospherics absolutely right. And he would realize that, like, when he went to his Kestrel, he actually got worse on his wind calls because the Kestrel makes you feel safe, but then he wasn't actually watching what was happening downrange. He was getting his data point right where he was at, And I never even thought about that until I've seen him say this a couple times to different people when people are asking about a Kestrel recommendation. He's like, just don't use it as a crutch, And it's even little things like that. You're like, oh no, the Kestrel is badass. Like, I'm gonna use it all the time, but like, nope. Like, just even little things to pick up from, from experienced shooters like that. I mean, I've been shooting a while when he said that, and then still I was like, oh yeah, I should probably not do that.
Yeah, I get that, and it's amazing how. I can't remember. We did it a few episodes ago where we talked about how many times you need to update your atmospherics. And I can't remember who the heck we were talking with. But it was like, between a match, it was, so many degrees. It was like maybe once in the morning, once in the afternoon. I mean, you're going to have more issues in your own self reading wind and different things than worrying about going through your freaking Kestrel trying to figure out how the hell you're going to get through it. You know what I mean? And that's the biggest thing is I think a lot of us, myself included, put the issues in our own head to begin with because we don't exactly know, we're so worried about missing that we're adding stuff on that we don't need to be adding. And I know I'm probably not the only one that's done it. Everybody's kind of done it, but that's just kind of how it is. Now, Zach has a question. How do you all come over your first stage jitters? How do you guys do it?
I have a really dumb answer, but I swear it's what I do every time. I volunteer to go first. I don't watch anybody go. I go in with my plan. I shoot, and either it went well or it went bad, but I got over it without overthinking anything.
What about you guys?
Yeah, I agree with Jose. Like, I volunteer to go first on some stages just to get it out of the way. Like, it's one of those weird things. Like, as soon as you rack the bolt getting into the first position, like, I kind of just forget about what stage it is, what place I'm in, like what the match is. That doesn't matter. It just goes into performing on that stage. But prior to that, I think Jose gave a pretty good answer. Just get it over with. Right. Doesn't really help a whole lot, but yeah, it makes sense to me.
What about you, JD?
Yeah, one of those getting over it and just kind of doing it. It's one of those things you got to roll with it. What I do really when it's the first stage of the day, when I'm first out is when I'm about 3 shooters up, or 3 shooters from going up, I'll walk up and I'll just visualize for the 10 minutes it takes those shooters to shoot the stage and for those guys to rotate through. And I'll just kind of ignore everything, kind of like John does when he's doing his prep, kind of be antisocial like that. And then once I confirm everything, it's just kind of like execute. The big thing with that, though, is, when you visualize, you're going up with a plan, you've mentally rehearsed it, but you just got to roll with what you get at that point. Don't worry about it. When you get done with it, learn from it there. Don't beat yourself up kind of while you're shooting it.
Right. And I think one big thing that a lot of people need to take into account, and I've seen it time in and time out, is they'll go zero their rifle. They're a little bit off. It gets in their freaking head, and then it completely ruins them for the entire match because, I didn't zero it right. I was chasing it. I was doing everything. I think one of the biggest things that you can do for your first stage jitters is just be confident. Go into that stage with a level of confidence going, okay, I know I'm going to go through this. We're going to get everything figured out. I'm going to understand what I'm doing. And I think a lot of it is just in your head, getting your head mentally prepared for whatever you're going to do. And maybe that is being antisocial and just going through it in the head. Now, if you've ever gone and shot like a USPSA, or if you've ever gone and shot like a 3-gun match, you'll watch the freaking really, really good shooters. If you watch Jerry, if you've watched, the Gibsons, if you've watched any of those guys and you sit back and watch them, they don't say a word. They'll walk through the stage visually, and visualize everything that they're doing. And, this is what I'm going to do on this position. This is what I'm going to do. Don't sit and bullshit. Just kind of step back and visualize, okay, if I'm going to go into this barricade, I'm going to push my gun all the way over, and then get that in your head and just kind of go through the steps in your head. And I mean, I'm no freaking top 10 shooter. I'm no pro shooter. And the biggest reason is because I can't freaking practice. I don't have time for it. But in my head, I know what I need to do. And a lot of times, your biggest enemy in shooting is yourself anyway. So how do you guys mentally prepare, Jose?
Well, so actually, this is a great segue to what I was about to say, but you brought up a good point about guys that'll have a bad zero the morning of. I'm pretty notorious I'm actually the world's worst about mounting a scope the night before a match because I just move so much stuff around. But I used to have a habit of, especially for summer matches, after work on Friday night, I would go to the range and check my zero on Friday night, because then a lot of times you only have 30 minutes. Like the range will go hot at 8 and 8:30 is the safety brief. And if you've got something wonky happening, then you get all frustrated, you get in a hurry, and it's in your head all day. I'd literally go to my local range, zero on Friday night. I'd take 20 shots from, 400 to 1,000. All right, everything feels good. And the next morning I'd just be, shooting the shit for, 30 minutes until stage brief, and then it's good to go. And even that alone takes that last little earworm, out, where you could have done it without pressure instead of getting down. There's 30 guys on the line and you're fighting for a dot, and so just even taking, not everybody can do it, but I used to literally drive 30 miles to the range on Friday night just to get it out of the way. And that honestly alleviates a lot of stress.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just another kind of point to go with that too is don't forget to have fun. So I think one of the best matches it was actually my first match win. I was adjusting both zero and my atmospherics in my applied ballistics because my phone had taken a crap on me 3 days prior, and I switched over to my old phone and forgot that applied ballistics didn't back up my gun build. So I literally made up data the day of the match and was adjusting it the entire day. And I wasn't worried about it. It was kind of like the day I had my trigger go down. I just started having fun with it, stopped worrying about performance, and I ended up getting first place by like 4 impacts, I think. And then me and the second place guy were ahead of everybody else by like 10. Just because I wasn't thinking about it as a competition. I wasn't thinking about it as the investment and like, oh, I need to perform, I need to do well. I was just out having fun. And if you focus on why you're doing it, like even the pro shooters, everyone only shoots because it's fun. If it was miserable 100% of the time, none of us would do it. But then we kind of forget that when we go into matches because we've invested time and money, and it could be half your barrel life because it's a long match. Like we start focusing on all that stuff, you forget why you're there, and you kind of lose or you induce stress into your process.
Right. Yeah. And I think I've shot a couple of my best matches, I just showed up and I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to, have a good time. I've got a great crew. I can talk to them. We can bounce ideas off of each other. And another thing that I've been seeing a lot lately, and this kind of goes with a lot of the people signing up for my match, they freak out when they don't shoot with the people that they're used to shooting with, right? And this happened to me heat stroke in Oklahoma a couple years ago when I was shooting for Team Remington. I showed up, they tore everybody out, made us go self squad with everybody else, and that's probably honestly one of the funnest things that I've ever done, because I met some new guys that were freaking stellar dudes, and I learned some new things from some new guys that I wouldn't have ever shot with before. And I want to challenge everybody that's listening. When you sign up for a match, go sign up with a bunch of people you don't know, and you might have some freaking fun, because you're learning something. It's amazing how much you also get it in your head when you're shooting with your buddies, how much you want to beat their ass when you're shooting. And then you actually screw yourself up in the long run, because you're like, oh, you're trying so hard instead of focusing on shooting and having a good time. And I think that's a big, big thing that everybody could maybe learn something. And me personally, I think I want to go shoot with other squads too, because there's some freaking good shooters out there I know I can learn a lot of good stuff from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything quiet in the gallery?
No, definitely. Yeah, when I visualize, when I get ready for my stages, I go through target sequence probably 10 times, something like that, at least, before I do anything else. After that, I look at the positions. I focus exactly where I'm going to drop my rifle, little things like that. I look at what magnification I want to be on, and kind of what body position I want to be in, and then really kind of equipment after that. It's kind of ancillary outside of a bipod. So, I mean, from there, you just visualize all that, kind of go through the motions, watch myself go shoot the match, shoot the stage, apply the dope, because I'm doing holdovers for everything, really. And sometimes I use a board, sometimes I don't. So kind of focus on that dope with the specific group of targets if they're closer. And then, yeah, kind of like Cole said, just for everyone out there, it's kind of like my turn to go. Just kind of say fuck it and roll with it. From there, put a big smile on my face and have a good time. If I come out on top, cool. If I don't, whatever. I probably learned a lot more. So,
right. And don't let it get in your head. I think that's the biggest thing. If you shoot a bad stage, and I'm preaching to my own choir here, it's like, don't let freaking you get in your own head and screw with it, because you're gonna tank right after. We've all seen it. Jose's seen it. Remember, he commented on a match last year where a couple people threw a fit, looked like little babies, and it also makes you look like a complete asshole too. So
it's true. Well, and honestly, right? Like you could pull all sorts of metaphors from other competitive, scenarios or whatever. But the whole short memory thing, right? Like a miss is awful lot like a quarterback throwing an interception. You just forget it, and the next shot still has to be made, whether you suck or not. The next shot has to be made, right? So, I mean, the other thing too, to me, I hate swimming, right? So if you tell me we got to go swim somewhere, that induces stress to me, right? But you could actually talk about once that clock goes, that beat goes, shooter ready, fire. It's kind of like, all right, we're going underwater and swimming the length of the pool. You can freak out underwater, or you can keep calm no matter what happens, right? And a lot of guys will literally, they thought they were going to go in high kneeling and it's too high, but they can't stand up. And they'll fiddle with that position for 30 seconds, because they can't make their mind up. You're holding your breath either way. Make a good decision and keep pushing. You know what I mean? A lot of guys they just lose it, and it's absolutely not valuable whatsoever. You just hold your breath. It's going to be over. Make your shots and keep moving,
Right. Yeah. And so moving along with that, I think we can go into the gear selection part of what we wanted to talk about. Now, I'm a gear whore, I'll admit it. If you look in the short bus, there's 30 bags, there's tripods, there's all sorts of stuff. But I think honestly, the guys that are gear whores are honestly giving themselves a little bit of a crutch too, because they don't practice with one thing or just a small group of things. They got so many things that you're not practicing with it and you're not proficient with it. going into a match or something, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Is it better to have one or two bags and roll with it, or are you bringing the whole freaking kitchen sink? Go, Jose.
I like to have I guess I like to have a kitchen sink of tactics, but I don't like to have a kitchen sink of gear. So I do like a gamer plate for certain situations. I do think there's just some certain left and right stability that's created. So I always have one in my pack. Now, I don't think I've used it in the last 3 matches I've shot, but I always have it because it's light. It's like 6 ounces and fits in my pack. I use an udder bag. I still really, really want to get my hand on the Schmedium Game Changer. I think that thing's going to be pretty jam up perfect. But I usually have a rear bag, like a little soft strap tightenable bag, an udder bag, and my tripod. And that's usually that's the 4 items I carry that I may use on any stage. I don't carry the kitchen sink, but
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm a minimalist when it comes to gear, and part of that's just because I started shooting in the tactical side, and you're never going to carry 30 pounds of crap that you can't use unless there's maybe if I find this. You've just got too much other shit you have to carry. I only ever use one barricade bag and a rear bag. I have a hog saddle and tripod with me, but I've used it maybe once in the last 3 matches, maybe. And part of that also goes from like watching other shooters. So I've seen shooters show up, and actually I had a match at Peacemaker 2 years ago. There was a guy who tried to use a tripod on every stage. They had no gear restrictions, and no matter what the stage was, he ran up with his tripod, legs collapsed all the way in or all the way out, and spent half of every stage messing with his tripod because he can never get it set up. And actually Steven was with me for that match, and we were both just kind of wondering like what this guy was doing. And then we would go use a Game Changer on a cattle gate and then clean the stage. And it's like, if you didn't waste 35 seconds trying to set up your tripod to support the rear of the rifle, you could have just had a solid position and sent it, and you would have been fine. And so I think a lot of people do use gear as a crutch, and they kind of try and focus their positions around the gear instead of using the gear to support their position. I mean, it kind of goes into something as simple as like the military recently has started allowing mag supported prone for their annual calls in both the Army and the Marine Corps side. And I've noticed a lot of people shoot mag supported prone worse than they shoot slung prone because they're now basing their entire position off of the magazine. And so now they've got this tiny half square inch pivot point, and they're grabbing the mag with their support hand instead of having a solid position, and then just lowering to the point that the mag touches the ground. And so I see that happen a lot in PRS, is people will try and base their position around the gear instead of using the gear to actually solidify their position even more.
I think so. Going to that crutch comment too,
yeah,
I think
I think one of the big issues as well is people are quick to spend a lot of money in hopes that something is going to eliminate training or to get around training, kind of things like that. So, I do the same thing. I have 2 bags that I use. I use Armageddon gear, their squishy rear bag as a front end support, and then I use the X-Wing as a rear support. The only kind of non-standard thing, I guess, for me that I want to really get into is Arca rail on everything, because it's so easy to stabilize that if you're not using a bag, because you have that 1.5 inch, 1.25 inch of flat surface that works really well if you can't use a bag or something like that.
Yeah, that Arca rail too. I've even put it on, like I put it on my buddy's RPR 22 and on my AR that has a pretty narrow forearm. And what's funny is Area 419 is going to make an awesome Arca rail, but especially for like a cheap AR or a cheap 22. On my cheap stuff, I actually will go buy a $12 one off Amazon that's 12 inches long, and it works just as good most of the time. So a lot of guys that want to like go modify their stuff, it isn't like you got to go buy a $120 rail for one. But going to that crutch thing too, kind of where we go back to the mental game. One thing that I would advise people, for one, we do, guys will try to get gear in order to avoid training. I run tripod a lot in the match, but I actually rarely practice with it because I know I can use it. And I'm constantly trying to actually practice with just one bag. And if I practice with just one bag, I can go into a stage where I thought I was going to run a tripod and realize the tripod doesn't fit. Maybe tank trap's turned wrong and I can't get those legs settled or whatever. And a lot of guys will just waste time to force that to work, and they don't have a good plan B. So you go into a match, the bag doesn't fit in the hole. Port hole's too small, bag's too tall, and I can't see through my scope now. Ditch it. Quit trying to fight it. Go to plan B. Have lots of tools in your arsenal, and don't be scared to change your plan midstream. Like, be confident in your skills at that point to be flexible. So I would definitely suggest that.
Yeah. And just so the listeners understand, JD can't hear Jose. So when Jose starts talking, JD starts talking. And then so we're trying to make it work. I don't know what the hell is wrong with the freaking program, but it's kicking my ass. We're trying to figure all this out. This whole freaking program is just biting us in the ass. But Melissa, hell, we got Melissa on. Melissa's wife, Jim.
We have been graced by royalty.
Yeah. So I think 2 bags are enough. Game changer and big ass fat bag. I also use the game changer's rear bag. If you're shooting prone, you can always borrow more gear if you see. Yeah, she's 100% right. I usually try to carry a couple bags. I've got my game changer, which I've loved, and like Jose said, I want to try the Schmedium one. The Schmedium one's badass from what I've heard. And then the new wax kit, the canvas ones that are sticky,
yeah,
I've heard those things are awesome too. So those are 2 things that are probably going to end up on the short bus here pretty soon. But one of them that I've had for a long time that's done me really, really well was from Short Action Precision, and that was the Solo Sack. Now, it was a sand-filled bag. It was a heavy little SOB, but that thing just contours your rifle right into it. And the way the sand was in it was awesome. Still got it. Still heavy as hell. I wouldn't want to freaking ruck with it, but it's an awesome little piece of kit for anybody that wants to do it. Now, I think that's where the Schmedium is going to come in because, you get into a barricade where you've got less room. You've got a giant-ass rifle. You've got a big freaking scope. You got everything on there. You don't want a giant bag in there, and I think from what I've been watching in the matches that I've been taking pictures of lately, a lot of people are going away from the giant rear bags in the rear position and just trying, because the new rifles are freaking legit for balance, right? You can put weight kits on them. You can do everything else. Just let the freaking rifle sit there and shoot. And it's amazing how many people are trying to lock that big bag in the back, and they're freaking trying to do the figure 8, trying to go across the target and get in there. And it's amazing to me. Like you guys said, the simpler, the better. Now, Melissa said we have the Schmediums in stock. I'll for sure go to Armageddon Gear. They've been a huge freaking supporter of POI. They're sponsoring Dog Valley Precision. They're actually doing our trophies at Dog Valley Precision. So the trophies are gonna be the Armageddon Gear, the drag bags with the Dog Valley logo and everything on them. So they're gonna be badass. We appreciate Tom and Melissa, freaking good people over there. But so let me ask you guys this. We can do this and then we'll move on. Each of you tell me the 2 bags that you would take with you. If you had a choice, you only had 2 bags, what would be the 2 bags?
Go, JD.
JD, you go first.
Fair enough. I'd take my pint-sized game changer with sand, the wax canvas one, and then I'd take the squishy rear bag from Armageddon Gear that I kind of added some new fill to and added another strap to it. Those would be my 2 bags.
So I would say any type of barricade bag. I've got a Thunderbird. I think it's Thunderbird Arms. Sent me one of their bags when they first started making it before Game Changer came out with the grippy ones. He started making one similar to Game Changer, but had a grippy underside for kind of those angled tank trap style shots. And so that's the main one I use on the front. And then for the rear, I've got a handmade rear bag that I made 7 years ago when I was in the fleet still. And that's my go-to rear bag. It's a odd-shaped rectangle, so I've got a couple of different heights. But the biggest thing, I think brand has less to do with it, but as long as you have a solid barricade bag, that's like the most important thing, whether it's Weebad or Game Changer or whatever. As long as it's a good one that you've practiced with, practice being the key. Really doesn't matter as long as you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'll actually say, variety is the spice of life. And I know there's guys watching this who would say they just take 2 Game Changers, like the OG and the pint size or something like that. I will say, I know that Game Changer is probably about to become my main bag. But Melissa brings up a good point. She talks about you can actually use the medium or even the pint size as a very effective rear bag. I actually do the same with the udder. A lot of times when I'm shooting prone, I'll actually use the udder as my rear bag. And so my answer would actually be, and it's because probably what I'm going to end up doing is always having the udder and the medium with me. And that's just because I do believe, especially like a tank trap, like in the center, or there are some very goofy barricades where those 4 legs on the udder can create a little bit of advantage. So rather than have 2 Game Changers, why not have a 4-leg and a 2-leg bag, right? But that's my answer because it's probably what I feel like I'm about to go to as soon as I can get one of those mediums on order. Because they do work great as a rear bag, and now you've got multiple options for how you're going to ride barricades in PRS.
Yeah, we've definitely got to put in our Armageddon gear order. I just got to figure out how the hell Tom can answer his emails because he's always so freaking busy. You got to send him. Him and Melissa are always out making videos, making people laugh. So let's move on now. I wanted to briefly hit this because I want to try and get JD to do a Kestrel training for all of us because I've got 3 Kestrels, love them to death. I've got the new HUD, I've got everything, but I'm an idiot when it comes to getting everything set up. So if you're all interested in something like that, let us know. But I know we're going to go through that now. I can probably say it for all 4 of us. Don't we use Kestrels? Isn't that what everybody's using right now?
Mine just came in last night.
So I haven't actually jumped on the Kestrel bandwagon. I learned how to use it when I was in. I used it while I was on a team, but I just use applied ballistics on my phone, mainly because of kind of what Jose was talking about earlier. Like so many people get sucked into Kestrels, and we saw it in the Marine Corps when the Marine Corps first started issuing them. People started using it as a crutch. Every time they missed, it was like, oh, my data's got to be wrong. I inputted something wrong. It couldn't have been me. And they immediately go to the Kestrel. You see it at matches all the time, every stage. People are sitting there spinning their Kestrel around, trying to get the most up-to-date out. It doesn't matter. Like, you update it, like you said earlier, Cole, you update it in the morning when you get to the range, and you maybe update it in the afternoon if there's been a huge temperature swing. Other than that, there's really no need for it. The wind at the firing line is only a small fraction of what your wind call should be, and half the time it's not even accurate to what the wind's doing downrange. They're a great tool, don't get me wrong. I just personally don't use one so I don't get sucked into it.
Right. Yeah, and I understand that. And we've had that discussion to where people were just constantly on their damn thing trying to, and I was at a match the other day and I was actually taking pictures of one of the long range stages, and you could watch the dust go this way and then you'd watch it go that way and you'd watch it go this way. And, if you guys haven't listen to the podcast we did with Emil Praslik and JD, because there's a lot of good things in that. You can trust the Kestrel to a point. Yeah. But you still have to understand what the hell the wind is doing downrange and the law of thirds and everything else that comes into variables with your Kestrel. The Kestrel only gives you a small piece of the pie. And the more you screw with it, the more you're going to throw yourself off and you're going to be chasing it the rest of the day. And that's not one of the things you want to go from stage to stage going, shit, I wish I would have freaking not screwed with this. I wish I wouldn't have done this, or now I've got too many variables. I don't know what the hell I put in there wrong, because it's amazing how you'll put in one variable and it'll throw everything off if you screw with it. Trying to take advantage of that. But do you guys have anything else on the Kestrel?
Yeah, I got some on that. So we use Kestrels pretty prevalently. We've seen the same issue that John has, though. With guys kind of using it as a crutch. And we've actually modified a lot of what we've done to make it more realistic and kind of get people out of their heads. And we've really pushed bringing back dope cards, kind of something like that. And what we do is we base our dope cards, we have the density altitude written on the top of it. So really, once I get a good chrono on my rifle with my bullet, I'll do DA dope cards out to really 1,000 meters, really, probably in density altitudes from -1,000 all the way up to 10,000 feet. And really all I'm using my Kestrel for at that point is, hey, what's the DA? What card do I need to use? What card's closest? And with that, it takes a lot of the, I have too much information. It's just enough info for you to get hits on target and to focus on what you need to focus on, which is really proper fundamentals and win calls.
Yeah, that's a great point, JD. Last year I like to shoot the Burris Optics Team Challenge every year. It's this kind of run and gun, fine range, engage type format, and so a lot of guys run the armbands because you can only handle so much technology under the clock while you're also moving, and ounces mean pounds. And so that's what we do. Basically, we know it's Wyoming, it's the summertime. I'll carry a DA for 5,000, 6,000, all the way up to 10,000. And because sometimes you start at 7:30 in the morning, sometimes you start at 11 in the afternoon, 11 in the morning, noon. And so literally we'll look, okay, DA is 8,000. And for the next hour, that's what we're going to shoot. And I could not believe how accurate it was after I used to be that guy that would sit there and just fiddle with technology. I mean, honestly, that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and if most of you don't know what DA is, look it up. It's density altitude. It just factors everything a little bit differently, but you don't have to keep chasing. Everybody's like, oh, it's another 5 degrees, so I need to change that. It's another, oh, it got a little bit sunnier, so I need to recheck all that. Just run DA and be fine with it. And we can do another podcast on that, kind of teach everybody, because I'd still like to learn more on it myself. So like I said, this podcast was started for me to freaking learn about it as much as anybody else. So, next thing, now let me go back before we get too deep in this. Now, Whitney talks about training. What do you guys think is a good training regimen for someone that cannot get to the range or even can't afford to put those rounds down range? Now, everybody said it. I've seen it on multiple podcasts. And it's dry fire. Now, we just got, a lot of us at POI just got the indoor dry fire training systems. And we're trying to go through and update that. Now, Jeremy's on here. Jeremy's got them. I think he had them in stock, Swanee's Comp Gear. Go to Swanee's Comp Gear. And then he does have the Armageddon gear bags in stock too. I noticed somebody else put that there. So go help him out. He's definitely helping a lot of people out in the industry. If you can't go there, go to Armageddon gear. But those indoor dry, I've got one right up here in the front of the office where if I get they say when you're sitting in front of a computer or something else, take a few minutes. So I've got a chair out there. I've got a couch right there. I've got a ladder. I've got a garbage can. I've got different things sitting out there that I can pull over and practice. And it is amazing to me just going through those simple steps. And I've actually got my scope vision on it. So I'm recording what I'm doing and I'm watching my breathing and everything else. My breathing sucks bad. And and a lot of it's because I'm fat, but I've been trying to shut up, Jose. I've been trying to figure out how to, get my breathing under control. And a lot of it's probably freaking yoga and stretching, but it's amazing how you get into some positions, and a lot of those positions have a lot more effect than you think they do. Mm-hmm. Now, trying to get down there, get your belly in, trying to suck your lungs in, and understanding how much more breathing you've got, especially when the target's further out there and you're trying to shoot off a muzzle. But so let's start with JD again. What are you doing to train while you're at home, sitting around the house doing your thing? What do you do? What's your training regimen?
The only thing I do differently, I guess, than dry firing is I use a shot timer for everything. And what I want to do kind of with a shot timer is two things. I want to work on my par times, kind of getting into position and breaking that first click as quick as I can. But then also, we see this with everyone who goes and shoots competitively. There are some people that are just afraid of the shot timer. So I'm conditioning myself to look at the shot timer as more something that's releasing me to let me do my job, which is shoot that stage. But then at the same time, I'm getting my positional work down where, hey, I can get into that weird kneeling position and break off a shot, a good clean shot in 5-6 seconds, something like that. And that's really the only thing I'm doing differently is adding that shot timer.
So I see in his comment that he's talking about can't afford to put down the match barrel, right? I mean, we can talk about dry fire, but dry fire can mean many things. It can mean, are you going to perfect your prone position laying in your living room floor and your finger position's perfect and your grip is perfect and blah, blah, blah. Or can dry fire mean using the indoor dry fire training system? We know those are great. I will say a lot of guys think that you got to put a couple hundred rounds down a gun a week or whatever. I would actually encourage everybody to go look up Jim C's 40 rounds to perfect PRS practice. He actually has and it's actually a dot drill. It's a piece of paper at 100 yards. You could literally do it at your own local range. And I don't remember all the details off the top of my head, but basically he has a training regimen that 40 rounds, and that's good enough training for a day, and very effective. So that's one thing that would limit, frankly, your cost, right? So it'd make it cheaper. And then I kind of hybridize that with what JD said, which is I used to hate the PRS wall. Like I sucked at the PRS wall. Well, I wouldn't shoot it 8 rounds, blah, blah, blah in 2 minutes. I would try to shoot 4 rounds in 40 seconds from 4 positions because I wasn't necessarily practicing the follow-up shot. I was practicing the position building and the first shot. If I only had a limited amount of rounds or limited amount of time, then the second shot's easy. You've already got your position built. As long as you saw where your impact was, you should be able to adjust. And also your second shot, a good shooter is going to take that second shot 3 to 4 seconds after the first shot. But if you can get to where you can build a position, you can move and build a position, take that shot in 10 seconds, you'd be surprised how much time you give yourself to think when you're actually under the clock. If you're practicing something like 4 positions in 40 seconds or, 6 rounds in 70 seconds or something like that. But you can kind of take out the fluff of what a stage gives you and really kind of focus on what's the hard part of said stage.
So I'm a little bit biased, as Cole knows. Mostly what I've been shooting the last year and will be shooting most of this year is 22 rimfire stuff. And for those of you that don't know, it essentially just mirrors PRS. It's just reduced ranges and everyone's got the same caliber. There's no option. It has to be 22 LR. And for me, I think that's one of the biggest things because so many like Remington 700 print 22s have come out, especially in the last year. You can mimic your match centerfire gun with a 22 that now has more or less an infinite barrel life, and you can shoot 50 rounds for $7. So you can go to the range and do that 40 round perfect PRS practice, and it costs you a grand total of $7 versus costing you $40 to $80 depending on what your PRS load is, and a hundredth of your barrel life. So you can only do it a limited amount of times before a match and all that kind of stuff. So you really don't have to worry about barrel life, and you're still able to practice holdovers and whatnot on reduced ranges. For the 22 shooting out to 300 yards, which most of these matches are, is comparable to shooting a 308 out to a grand, which is more holdovers than like a 6.5 Creedmoor, but I mean, 6.5 Creedmoor is like 70% of what a 308 is. So you're still getting holdover practice. You're still getting significant wind practice for pennies on the dollar compared to some of the centerfire stuff. The other thing when it comes to PRS, most of PRS is not standard positional shooting. It's barricades, tripods, all that kind of stuff. You don't actually have to dry fire for that. You just need to practice using your gear. If you have to start the stage with your tripod collapsed, it's a huge benefit in your living room with no targets, no snap caps, no nothing, to just practice, like JD said, under a shot timer, setting up your tripod and getting your rifle in it and getting it stable. Or taking your game changer and starting all your gear in your hand to setting your game changer on top of your dining room chair and getting your rifle on top of it. You don't have to dry fire on anything, but you can make your position building more efficient, and that'll give you more time to focus on the shot during a stage just because you're comfortable with your gear and you've rehearsed and practiced adjusting it, going from standing to kneeling with a tripod, just practicing adjusting all your legs to get it down. Stuff like that that doesn't even require dry fire or snapping in makes a huge difference in a match.
Yeah, I think you did get one thing wrong, though. I think a 22 at 100 yards for wind is kind of like shooting a 308 at 100 yards for wind.
No, I think he said like 300 yards. I think when we did it at Voodoo, you get out there, shut your mouth over there.
I've definitely held a 5 mil wind hold at 350 with a 22.
Yeah. Another training thing, and I've read it and seen it in a few places, is it's amazing to me if you've got limited rounds, but you want to get out there and shoot, how many guys will put up a giant freaking target at 300 yards and they feel all warm and fuzzy because they bang the shit out of it. But it doesn't do you any good a lot of the times because you could be hitting the top corner, you could be hitting all over. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that, taking a small target, whether it be like a 1 MOA, 1.5 MOA, or whatever it is, whatever you've got, putting smaller targets out there and taking your time to make those, those hits count. Now, Jeremy, in one of the comments, he talked about Jake Vibert. Now, if you've ever watched Jake shoot, it is one of the most slow and methodical things you'll ever see in your life. When I'm shooting, it looks like my freaking hair's on fire and I'm chasing a chicken. I mean, I'm going crazy, and nothing is going through and nothing is flowing like it should be flowing. And it's amazing. Like I sat and watched him a couple years ago on a stage at Dog Valley Precision. And I'm like, dude, he's not going to have a freaking enough time to finish this as slow as he's going. And he finished, got 9 out of 10. And he still had like 5 or 8 seconds left. And I'm like, there's other people running around like freaking crazy. And it's amazing how many times people are trying to throw stuff up there and they're spending all their time to getting positions and doing stuff like that. But why is he taking so long? And it's because he's taking the time away from the match to practice those solid positions, just like these guys are talking about. Whether it's in your living room on the back of the couch, whether it's on the back of a chair, they'll all come to fruition on a stage when you're going through it and you're understanding how does your gun balance on that target or on that prop? How does your bag react? How, different things like that. And it all, I think a lot of it comes back to the training that you're doing, not shooting, spending that time. Now, a lot of you guys and gals spend a shitload of time in the freaking reloading room because you're trying to get it within 1/10 of a kernel or whatever you're doing. But in my opinion, and I'm going to say it again, spend the time with positional stuff and trying to learn that. Now, let's go a little bit further into some of the stuff that we take with us to matches. Now, what's one thing that you guys take to matches that you think is probably your most invaluable piece of kit in your mind? What's the biggest thing that you take that does the most good for you?
Starter bag.
By you, JD.
The one thing that, if I had to go with one thing, man, that's a hard question. I would probably say shooting positions and arc rail on my rifle, because the rifles that I use they're not flat bottom, and I can do a lot with an arc rail that's flat on a barricade. It gives me a lot more stability than I can with my rifle that has a oval shaped handguard.
So mine's a bit of a weird one. Having a good sling set up for the gun. So one thing, especially recently with the 22 stuff, the NRL 22 series has started throwing a lot of positional stages, slung positional stages into the matches. And if you forget your bags, you can rest the gun directly on a barricade and you'll do okay. Like, you're not going to do terrible. But if you forget your sling, or like my last match, I went from a rifle that had QD mounts on it to a rifle that had sling swivel mounts on it. And I forgot my sling swivel sling attachments. So I had to shoot an entire positional stage without a sling. So I was just freehanding it the whole time. And the difference between a positional stage with a sling and without a sling is way different than a barricade stage with and without a barricade bag, especially if you've got a heavy balanced rifle. So I think for me, it's making sure I actually have a sling, because that's bit me in the ass more than once. I've shown up and been like, I forgot this. Oh, it'll be fine. And then the third stage brief comes out and I'm like, it's not fine. Everything is not fine.
Only a square range shooter would say that.
It's true.
I'll take that. No, the thing is, I've got some really nice short action precision slings, but hell, I look like a freaking cat that just got wound up in a ball of yarn when I use a sling. Like I got it everywhere, and I look like I'm all stuck back in there. So this is the cool thing: is everybody has something different that they bring to the stage that or to the match that they think. Now Ryan commented a mindset. Now there's a lot of things that you can forget at home. And in the beginning of the podcast, we talked about, the confidence and mindset in what you're doing. But there's so many things that you could do. I think one of mine's, I mean, I can hit the dirt from anywhere, but I want to get close to the freaking target. So I think mine's probably either a kestrel or something to figure out where the hell I'm even hitting, because I can try and think of it in my head. But I guess again, you could probably have it all written down. I've seen a lot of times in the middle of a match where somebody's batteries die or something else. Now that's another thing that we can kind of go into here is the preparedness, in case something happens, right? So your kestrel dies, your phone dies, everything's going to shit. You don't know what to do. If your freaking kestrel dies in the middle of a match, what do you do? Now, have you guys got a backup plan for that? Or is that something that maybe even all of us need to work on?
At one point in time, I was just carrying my paper dope cards in my backpack at all times. That way, if any electronics went down.
Yeah, I usually keep mine saved. The Applied Ballistics app gives you an option to email it. So I usually just email it to myself every couple of months so that it's saved on my email somewhere. So if everything goes to shit, I can either pull it up or have somebody else pull it up or print it out if I'm at a hotel and just log on to my email and print it off. But I usually do have a backup outside of my phone.
What about you, JD?
Yeah, I'll usually back up with written dope. I don't do everything super precise. I'll just leave it in 50-meter increments, on those DA cards. And I'll have a stack of those with me in case my kestrel goes down, something like that. So.
Yeah, and see, this is something that I need to work on myself. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I get prepared, I'm like, I don't have anything. If I go out there and something dies, I'm in deep shit. So that's one thing in my mind now I need to put on my checklist is making sure that freaking JD hitting the damn screen. Sounds like a freaking woodpecker. Anyway, so that's one of the things. I mean, that's where we're coming back, and that's why we want to have this podcast today is kind of talking about going into the stage and going into the match prepared. And I'm just listening to this myself. I'm coming away with different things that I'm like, hell, I'm not prepared for that, and I don't know exactly what I'm doing. Let's hit on a couple more really quick things that maybe people don't think about. Or maybe it's something that we've been asked a lot about lately. One of them is dope cards or data cards. Now, where do you guys run all yours? Do you guys run a rail mounted, or do you run an armband, or what is it and why? Go ahead, JD.
I usually run something on the rail. Really 6 of one, half a dozen of another, depending on the stage. If there's something I have to stick my rifle through, I don't run it on the rail, and I'll just grab blue painter's tape and throw something right on my arm. But ideally on the rail, something that's right in front of me where it's not obstructing turrets or anything like that.
I'm gonna actually run I have started running the Coltac, and the reason I do that is there's a lot of our dope guards that go off to the left side of your gun or whatever, to the weak side of your gun are going to be rail mounted, and I break those. I hit them on barricades, whatever. The Coltac one's actually made out of bungee. It attaches to your scope via a little bungee ring. So one, it makes it cheap. Two, it's easy to put on and off. And you can stick it through a window and it moves out of the way and comes right back. So I really like that. But that's for like my stage specific dope. As far as having like my dope with me, a lot of time I'm gonna have those cards in a quarterback armband or something, $12 armband off of eBay. And I'm going to have kind of like similar to JD, like a lot of people are going to put 5-meter distances and stuff. The fact of the matter is you can do 50. I prefer 25. If you can put 25 from, 100 to 1,000, even, if your distance is 810, you can just, that 800 is one and 825 is the other, and you're going to do a tenth in between. And then I'll actually run 2 winds on there. So I'll put a 5 and a 10-mile-an-hour wind. And usually from there, I can figure out what my wind is going to be from there.
Yeah, so currently I'm running a Hawk Hill dope card, kind of like Ryan was just saying, mounted on the rail. I don't run my full dope card on it, though. Actually, the recommendation was from Bricks, one of the barrel guys at Hawk Hill, and I just put painter's tape over top of the card, and I just write my dope for each stage. I get the stage brief, I write down what the ranges are on the card, and then I go through and look up in my app what my holdover is for each one, and I write it down to the range. And then if it's one of those stages where I either have to hold or I've decided like, hey, I'm going to run a 5 mil and then hold everything else after that, I usually make a fresh piece of tape with what my actual game plan is. And I'll write at the top, like dialed 5 mils, and then write the holds for everything on top of that 5 mil hold or 5 mil dial. But yeah, I'll never run a full dope card with everything just because it's too much information. You're trying to search your card for what your specific targets are. And painter's tape is cheap. You get a roll and it'll last you like 3 seasons.
I got you. Sorry, I was pushing freaking buttons and it turned on the damn live thing, so it replayed to us. Screwing around. I'm seeing the Travis just released the NRL 22X season schedule, so I'm kind of gawking at it. Not like I could hit anything shooting it either, but we'll give her hell. There's one here in Utah. Next thing. Leveling devices. Now, I use Ascendant levels a lot. I've heard, now I haven't messed with it yet, that when people put them in the rifle cases, they don't think about bending them. Some of the Ascendant levels have been bent to where it's not 100% level. So taking care of it is a big thing. But what do you guys use to ensure that you're parallel, you're over your bore, everything's level, you're making that clean shot? What do you guys use?
All right, I'll start it off. So currently, I don't run any levels on any of my guns. I used to have levels on all my scopes, and then I started talking with Frank Galley and a couple other guys, and kind of started getting my eyes open to it being a little bit more, just more information that you don't necessarily need, or that your eye automatically picks up on. So if you talk to Frank, he talks about like how your eye can pick up on the level of 2 objects when you compare it shooting off of like whatever your barricade is and determining whether your reticle is level to the environment. And then I was also talking to another guy a couple of months ago that dealt with construction. I don't remember exactly what he did specifically in instruction, but he was like, how do you calibrate your levels? And there was no answer. I was just like, oh, you buy it and you throw it on the scope. And he's like, in a lot of construction crews, they have to calibrate or they have to keep buying new ones because they lose their calibration. They aren't level anymore. And so that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to like, well, what do we do as a community that prides ourselves on precision? We just kind of buy it, throw it on there and just assume it's good, assume the quality control was perfect and like, oh, everything will be fine. And we kind of trust the equipment more than you trust your own anatomy. So currently I haven't been running any levels. I wouldn't say that is the absolute way to go. We're going to see how it goes this season and see if I run into any major issues. But that's what I'm doing right now.
We use accuracy first levels, and I like it. It's a good curve design. It works really well with all of our scopes. Depending on kind of the ranges I'm shooting or the size of the targets is where I'm going to look at that either more or less. But when we put those on, to touch on what Jonathan said, yeah, you got to be precise. We don't just throw it on the scope and assume everything's level. When we're putting on our bubble levels, we're actually using a plumb bob to plumb the vertical stadia of our scopes. So once it's lined up and kind of locked in, then we'll plumb our levels based off of that and going back and forth probably a good 5 or 6 times to make sure everything's lined up properly before we say, okay, yeah, it's set.
So I'm probably more in the John's camp. Honestly, for a long time, I didn't run any levels at all. I put some just kind of ring or, just kind of scope mounted levels. And frankly, I don't look at them a whole lot. Now, we got the LR match coming up and beyond 1,000, I believe, obviously things kind of start to exponentiate themselves. So I think it's a little bit more important there, but PRS, where 90% of your shots are 800 and in. Maybe it's a bad habit, maybe it's not, but I just don't pay attention to it a whole lot. But I will say that one thing I've started going to is all of the Hawkins rings that have the built-in level. They're really not any more expensive than any other good rings out there, except it's a great added feature. And so to have that right in front of your eye, then it becomes a little bit more obvious to me, and I've paid attention a little bit more, especially like prone stages and stuff. But if you're going to see me running a level at all these days, it's probably just built into my rings.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And I think one of the big things that I think a lot of people have is it just, especially for newer shooters, it just adds one more thing to confuse the shit out of you when you're trying to shoot. You know, and you're trying to find targets. You're trying to make sure magnification's right. You're trying to go through all the steps, and it's one more thing. Now, I've gotten to the point to where I know I just kind of open my eye and I look for a certain light, you know, and that's kind of helped me a lot with ascendant levels. Was I don't look at the bubble or anything, but again, to Jonathan's point, I'm assuming that something's right. Is it? I don't know. But now I've kind of gone down the road of, hey, this is what I'm going to look for. I'm looking for that green light, and then I can send it. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. And it's something that I need to go out and maybe practice with a little bit more and make sure that I'm 100% comfortable with it too. And coming back, you know, full circle, it's about being comfortable with your equipment, knowing your equipment, and then, you know, going out to a match. And I think, again, coming back to the question that we had a while back with, you know, how the hell do you get the jitters out? And I think the biggest thing that you really need to do, Ryan said it, everybody said it, and it's a mindset. It's being confident in your stuff. It's being confident in yourself. It's understanding your equipment, and then, you know, going out and having a good time. I think it will help you have a lot better time if you're spending time at home, getting that confidence level up and ensuring that, you know, you're pulling the trigger right, you know, closing your eyes, even pulling the trigger, understanding where that brake is, understanding different things, you know, your breathing. That, like I said, that's one thing that indoor dry fire systems help me with a lot, is understanding that I'm not even close to being where I should be with my breathing, and I need to freaking get into yoga. So sign me up. I guess we'll go down that road. Some fat kid doing yoga, that'd be good. Make people puke everywhere. But is there anything that you guys want to cover that you think that we need to? And I mean, we can go into other podcasts on this, but we're in an hour 12. Everybody's probably sick of listening to me rabble. But is there anything else that you guys think that anybody that's listening could benefit from real quick? JD?
Biggest thing would be don't take yourself too seriously. I mean, we all shoot because it's fun. It's a good time. You learn a lot. It's fun really kind of delving into the weeds with kind of all the ballistics nerdery that we can get into. But just go out there, have a good time. I mean, who cares where you place? If you're learning something, you're learning something. Okay, if you're too wrapped up in the prize table, then, well, put your mind somewhere else.
And I think that's a good point to bring up too, for both amateur shooters in like trying not to worry so much about what your place is and just worry about learning and kind of improving yourself, and pro shooters, especially if you're sponsored. The reason you're sponsored isn't to be that guy that's just the jerseyed shooter that we all look at and we're kind of like, oh, that guy's kind of an ass. It's to help people learn about the products you represent, to be a good ambassador to not even just your products, but to the sport, help new shooters and kind of that stuff. And again, not worry so much about your placing, what you're going to get for free off the prize table. Like, it's all about having fun and being a good community and network.
My advice is new gear may get you more hits, but it doesn't make you better. You make you better. You got to practice. You got to shoot. You got to learn your stuff.
Yep. And, you know, I went to a match the other day, took the short bus. A lot of people came up to me and, you know, were excited. They started talking to me about the podcast. I appreciate y'all for listening. I can't say it enough. There's a million podcasts out there, but it means a lot to us to have you guys kind of tune in. Again, if there's anything you guys can learn, let us know, and have a good night. We appreciate it.
Don't be afraid to pipe up. Send us your questions or topics and we'll cover them on the show. Thanks for listening.